BBC World News is brought to you by WLIW New York. Funding for this presentation has been provided by the Freeman Foundation of New York, Stowe, Vermont, and Honolulu, the Newman's Own Foundation, and the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation.
Pakistan's opposition leader Benazir Bhutto has been assassinated, shot by an attacker who then blew himself up. She was killed as she left this political rally of thousands of supporters in the city of Rawalpindi. These pictures were taken just minutes before she was attacked. Deaths are being reported in rioting in several cities. There's been worldwide condemnation of her killing 2 weeks before planned elections from allies and political rivals alike.
It is not a sad day, it is a darkest, gloomiest day in the history of this country.
Benazir Bhutto's body is now being flown to southern Pakistan for burial. President Musharraf blamed terrorists and declared 3 days of mourning. Enraged supporters of the assassinated Pakistani opposition leader Benazir Bhutto have burned vehicles and attacked shops in parts of the country. The former Prime Minister was assassinated while campaigning for January's election in the city of Rawalpindi. She was fatally shot in the neck by a gunman who then detonated a bomb which killed at least 20 people. President Musharraf blamed terrorists, announced 3 days of mourning, and appealed to the nation to remain peaceful. But after the intense anger expressed during 6 weeks of emergency rule recently, there is new uncertainty about January's election and fears of widespread violence and unrest. The BBC's Barbara Plett is in Islamabad.
In just a simple wooden coffin, leaving the hospital where she died, the body of Benazir Bhutto was borne by mourners. They reached out to touch it, pushing, jostling for final contact with their leader. Just that morning, she'd been carrying their hopes for an election victory on the campaign trail in Rawalpindi, promising voters that she'd bring Pakistan out of crisis. After years in self-imposed exile, Ms. Bhutto was determined to make a political comeback. As she left the rally, she continued to greet party workers before getting into the car. But in what turned out to be her last moments, she couldn't resist standing up through the sunroof to again wave to supporters. It was a fatal decision. Police said a gunman seized this opportunity to shoot her and then blew himself up. The explosion threw party workers into panic and confusion. Overcome with shock and horror, they struggled to take in what had happened. Eventually, giving in to both grief and anger. Rescue services worked feverishly to save the injured and to move the dying. But emergency surgery could not save Benazir Bhutto. It was devastating news for her people. The party revolved around her. Sobering news also for her political opponents. The other main opposition leader came quickly to pay his respects. He now says his party will boycott elections, which he claims will be rigged.
Darkest, gloomiest day in the history of this country. Something unthinkable has happened.
Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto, ek zalim.
President Musharraf too condemned the attack. In an address to the nation, he appealed for calm. But on the streets, there was violence. Several people were killed by gunfire. Furious protesters set fire to banners, vehicles, even buildings.
People of Pakistan are very sad. People's Party chairperson has sacrificed his own life for the people of Pakistan, for the democracy of Pakistan.
The situation is volatile. Extra troops have been deployed. as Pakistanis wait to see what this means for elections and for their country. The next day or two will probably be critical as to how things develop. The president, as well as party leaders, have appealed for calm. They've also called for a period of mourning, in part to help diffuse tensions. But the assassination has thrown the political scene here into chaos, and it's made Pakistanis more uncertain and afraid for the future. Barbara Platt, BBC News, Islamabad.
There's been strong condemnation of the attack from the United States. In Washington, the BBC's Jonathan Beale reports.
President Bush had left Washington for Texas for his family Christmas retreat. He would have hoped that his ranch in Crawford would provide a respite from his political turmoils. But this is where he was brought the news of Benazir Bhutto's assassination, another setback in his war on terror.
The United States strongly condemns this cowardly act by murderous extremists who are trying to undermine Pakistan's democracy. Those who committed this crime must be brought to justice. We stand with the people of Pakistan in their struggle against the forces of terror and extremism. We urge them to honor Benazir Bhutto's memory by continuing with the democratic process for which she so bravely gave her life. Thank you, Mr. President.
In public, President Bush has always maintained his close ties with President Musharraf, seen as the key ally in fighting extremism. But behind the scenes, America had also been laying the ground for Benazir Bhutto's return. The hope in Washington was that they could work together. Now suddenly, those moderate pro-American forces appear more fragile.
It's a great tragedy because she stood for moderation, for rule of law, for democracy in our country, and our death is a loss for the cause of moderation, democracy, and rule of law for Pakistan.
That path to democracy had already been disrupted by President Musharraf's earlier declaration of a state of emergency. Last month, America sent its second most senior diplomat to Islamabad to call for a return to the rule of law and to urge reconciliation between President Musharraf and Benazir Bhutto. The US still hoping they could resolve their differences. Now, with her assassination, it's Pakistan that's having to reassure an anxious ally.
I would like to assure the American public that Pakistan has gone through many crises before. It's gone through wars, it's gone through assassination attempts, it's gone through, natural calamities, and our people are resilient, tough, and I think, God willing, we will come out of this crisis too with flying colors. This will only improve the Pakistani resolve to fight extremism and terrorism.
And that's just as important. In Pakistan's mountainous northwest region, there's been a resurgence of pro-Taliban forces. The fear for America is that the assassination of Benazir Bhutto may not just disrupt the democratic process, but also prove a setback to the war on terror. Jonathan Beale, BBC News, Washington.
Well, let's reflect on the signals. I'm joined by Shahid Sadullah, editor of the English section of Pakistan's Daily Jang newspaper. Shahid, welcome to BBC World. 12 days before the election, what's the impact on the multi-party political fabric, which did seem to be moving at least in a positive direction?
Yes, I think most people would say that this probably means that the elections are going to be postponed, if not cancelled. I think the sad part of it is that the elections somehow do not seem to be relevant anymore, because the elections are not an end in themselves. They're a means to an end, and the end must be greater political census and greater stability. Now, with Mr. Nawaz Sharif already having ruled himself out of the elections, the PPP must be in a state of disarray following this, and I don't know if they're in any state to be taking part in the elections. Therefore, you would have an elections in which the PMLQ, which is so-called the King's Party, would have an open run. As it is, even with all of them participating, there was a severe question mark over the credibility of the elections. Now they will have very little credibility at all, and therefore it will not be a solution to Pakistan's political problems.
What is Pakistan's People's Party, the PPP, without Benazir Bhutto?
Well, I think, the party in Pakistan, you have these dynastic parties. Very many people would tell you that Pakistani political parties are really cult organizations based around a cult figure. That applies to the PPP, it applies to Nawaz Sharif's party, it applies to Imran Khan's party. And with her taken out of the equation now, I think there would be sort of headless in a way, and it will not be very easy for the party to come up with a leadership with the same sort of international recognition, charisma and appeal as Benazir Bhutto.
We saw there John Negroponte, the US Deputy Secretary of State, who went and twisted arms, made sure that emergency rule was lifted, made sure that then General Musharraf did move the process forward towards the 8th of January. What is left of this political fabric, which did at least seem to have some kind of form until Benazir Bhutto was murdered?
Well, I think Benazir Bhutto had announced herself as being the one Pakistani politician who was unequivocally against religious extremism and who had declared that she was really, in terms of Pakistani politics, she was a liberal. The liberal and non-liberal definitions of Pakistani politics are based around the war and terror, and she was the one true liberal, and that is now out of the equation.
Where does this leave the Americans, though? That's what I'm getting at, in terms of their pressure on President Musharraf.
Well, I hope out of the situation in Pakistan, because, you know, the American backing for any Pakistani politician is the kiss of death. And the perceived backing that Ms. Bhutto had from the Americans was, I feel, in no small measure responsible for her assassination.
Shahid Sadullah of the Daily Chang, thanks for joining us here on BBC World. Stay with us here on the channel for this special coverage after the murder of Benazir Bhutto. Still to come, more reaction. Plus, with Benazir Bhutto's body being flown to her family tomb for burial, we reflect on what lies ahead for Pakistan. The lawyer Baba Awan was with Benazir Bhutto when she was attacked. He described what happened.
A difficult day for the entire Pakistani people because we have lost a very brilliant face representing the people of Pakistan on the global level. When we were coming out, I saw that there was very less security around us. Rather, there was one only deputy superintendent of police and an inspector and a few constables. Unluckily, the deputy superintendent was my college mate, and incidentally, he has also died in this incident. That I feel so sad and so torn up from inside on his death. And when we sat into two cars, both were belonging to Benazir Bhutto, I was in the front car, and she opted to sit in the rear jeep, but we were going bumper to bumper. When we came about a minute's drive, or less than that maybe, seconds, not more than 60 seconds from the place where we boarded the vehicle, and the firing started, and then there was a very huge bomb blast. Incidentally, I was with her on the 18th of October on the truck, which was hit by two blasts. So it was horrific for me, and my ears are affected, and I'm also hit from the left side. And then she was rushed to the hospital, and the hospital people, tried to conceal the news. Then I spoke to the gentleman who conducted the surgery, little surgery, tried to conduct. He's principal of a local medical college, and is socially known to me. And I asked him, why don't you tell us the straight? Then he said, pray for her. And when I insisted, he disclosed that it is all over.
You're with BBC World. Ms. Bhutto was a charismatic and controversial figure, part of a political dynasty in Pakistan, to many an icon, to others tainted by corruption. Here's the BBC's special correspondent, Gavin Hewitt.
In Pakistan's troubled history, Benazir Bhutto belonged to the country's best-known political family. She had only gone back to Pakistan in October. For some, she offered the hope of a return to democracy. She had been warned of the risks, and within hours, there was an attack on her motorcade. She survived, but more than 140 people were killed. Before returning to Pakistan, she had spoken out strongly against Islamic extremism. In the fight against terrorism, she was regarded as an ally of the West, and today there were many tributes to her.
Benazir Bhutto was a woman of immense personal courage and bravery. Knowing as she did the threats to her life, the previous attempt at assassination, she risked everything in her attempt to win democracy in Pakistan, and she has been assassinated by cowards afraid of democracy. Benazir Bhutto may have been killed by terrorists, but the terrorists must not be allowed to kill democracy in Pakistan.
The United States strongly condemns this cowardly act by murderous extremists who are trying to undermine Pakistan's democracy. Those who committed this crime must be brought to justice.
Twice, Benazir Bhutto was elected Pakistan's Prime Minister. She had been the first democratically elected woman Prime Minister of a Muslim country, but her influence went deeper than that. She was a member of a famous political dynasty. She was educated at Harvard and Oxford, where she was President of the Union. Her father, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, had been a populist Prime Minister in the 70s. He was deposed in a military coup and was executed 2 years later. Benazir Bhutto was initially reluctant to go into politics, but she was determined to oppose the military leader who had overthrown her father.
I suppose the one fact was the imprisonment of my father, which galvanized me and thousands of other Pakistanis into the political life.
One of her brothers, Murtaza, was shot, another poisoned. Hers has been a political family steeped in tragedy. In time, Benazir Bhutto fought and won an election. She portrayed herself as a modernizer, secular, pro-Western. She served a second term as Prime Minister, but was sacked for alleged corruption. Her husband, Asif Zardari, was also accused of fraud. They both denied all charges. She went into exile, only returning 2 months ago. When her convoy was attacked, there were questions about why the intelligence services hadn't protected her better.
They are able to conduct their attacks because of some level of collusion. I'm not saying that the government hatched a plot, but I am saying that elements within our administration and security apparatuses are people who want me out of the way.
There will be suspicions again as to how and why a suicide bomber was able to get so close to her. Her family said today she gave her life for democracy.
She risked her entire life for the nation. She's paid the price of being a westernized politician and looking for democracy in Pakistan.
When she returned home, she knew she might be assassinated. But her death leaves Pakistan in turmoil, anger on the streets, elections and democracy uncertain. And this in a country vital to the struggle against terrorism. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News.
Stay with us. We'll have more on the murder of Benazir Bhutto here on BBC World, with more analysis on what the future may now hold for Pakistan. The UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon gave his reaction to the murder of Benazir Bhutto.
I'm shocked and outraged by the assassination of former Prime Minister Mrs. Benazir Bhutto and many other civilians, people who have been killed by these terrorist suicide bombings. I call upon the government authorities to bring perpetrators to the justice, and I condemn in the strongest possible terms this assassination of Mrs. Benazir Bhutto. In that regard, I welcome the Security Council presidential statement condemning it in the strongest possible terms. I think this is a very appropriate measure by the Security Council, and I'm grateful to the President and members of the Security Council.
Well, President Bush described Ms. Bhutto's murder as a cowardly act and an attempt to undermine Pakistan's democracy.
The United States strongly condemns this cowardly act by murderous extremists who are trying to undermine Pakistan's democracy. Those who committed this crime must be brought to justice. Mrs. Bhutto served her nation twice as Prime Minister, and she knew that her return to Pakistan earlier this year put her life at risk. Yet she refused to allow assassins to dictate the course of her country. We stand with the people of Pakistan in their struggle against the forces of terror and extremism. We urge them to honor Benazir Bhutto's memory by continuing with the democratic process.
You're with BBC World, I'm Nick Gowing. President Musharraf has appeared on Pakistani television to blame unnamed terrorists for the murder of Benazir Bhutto. He declared 3 days of national mourning and appealed for nationwide calm.
Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto.
Paying tribute to respected Benazir Bhutto on this tragic incident, I declare a state of mourning for 3 days. The national flag will fly half-mast. This atrocity has been committed by those terrorists who we have been fighting against. I always say that Pakistan and its people face the biggest threat from these terrorists. I, on this tragedy, take a pledge and at the same time urge the whole nation to eliminate and root out these terrorists. Until then, we will not rest in peace, because this is the only way for Pakistan to survive and live. On this occasion, I appeal to the nation to remain peaceful and show restraint.
President Musharraf, news agencies are reporting that Benazir Bhutto's body has now arrived in Sukur in the south of the country before her funeral. There's been widespread condemnation across the world to the murder of Ms. Bhutto. Here's the BBC's Jim Fish with more on the international response.
Pakistan's neighbour and rival India was among the first to react with this statement from Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, read out by his spokesman.
Mrs. Bhutto was no ordinary political leader, but one who left a deep imprint on her time and age. Her contributions to a previous moment of hope in India-Pakistan relations and her intent to break India-Pakistan relations out of the sterile patterns of the past were exemplary.
The Afghan President Hamid Karzai had met Ms. Bhutto only hours before her death.
I met with her this morning. I found her to be a very, very brave woman with a clear vision for her own country, for Afghanistan, and for the region. A vision of democracy and prosperity and peace.
From the capitals of Europe, reaction to the news was a mixture of horror and trepidation for the future of Pakistan. The President of the European Union Commission, José Manuel Barroso, described it as a callous terrorist attack against democracy and against Pakistan. We hope, he said, that Pakistan will remain firmly on track for a return to democratic rule.
Absolute dismay. They were going towards elections. For me, she was a hope of stability for Pakistan. We are waiting for information we still don't have to understand what will be the next steps that the country can take.
The fear of Pakistan's neighbours and the rest of the world is that the protest fires on the streets of Rawalpindi and other cities may be just the foretaste of worse consequences to follow. Jim Fish, BBC News.
There's now great uncertainty as to whether Pakistan's parliamentary election scheduled for the 8th of January can go ahead, and fears for the future of a nation seen by the West as a key front line in the struggle against global terrorism and extremism. Here's the BBC's security correspondent, Frank Gardner.
Just hours before her death, this was Benazir Bhutto meeting Afghanistan's President Hamid Karzai. He had hoped she would be a stabilizing influence in the region.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
But it was not to be. The implications of her murder are a setback for neighbouring Afghanistan. NATO and over 7,000 British troops are deployed there, pushing back the Taliban and propping up Karzai's vulnerable government. But there can be no end to the Afghan insurgency without Pakistan's help. In the largely lawless region that straddles the porous common border, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda and other insurgents move across men, weapons and explosives. Pakistan's military has failed to control this region, but Ms. Bhutto had told America that if she regained power, she would allow US troops to pursue militants across the border into Pakistan. This can only have redoubled her enemy's determination to kill her. This was Benazir Bhutto speaking 3 months ago.
I'm a threat to the extremists. I'm not a threat to the moderates. So while there may be people who oppose my return, I know that there are many more millions of Pakistanis that are just waiting for me to come back to see the forces of moderation and freedom strengthened in my country.
Al-Qaeda had every reason to want Ms. Bhutto dead. Al-Qaeda's leaders, like Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, have set up new bases in Pakistan's tribal areas. Mohammed Sadiq Khan, the ringleader of the London bombers, almost certainly recorded this video at a secret training camp on his final visit to Pakistan. Whoever sent him to kill Londoners would have a vested interest in keeping Pakistan unstable and the military away from their camps.
Al-Qaeda has set up base inside Pakistan. It's been able to plot and plan a number of major mass casualty attacks around the world, particularly in the UK, in Pakistan. But they wouldn't necessarily be behind an attack like this.
Coming up in the next half hour, a special edition of Asia Today that's presented by Peter Dobby with more on the implications after the murder of Benazir Bhutto in Rawalpindi. First, let's get the weather here on BBC World.
BBC World News was brought to you by WLIW New York. Funding for this presentation was provided by the Freeman Foundation of New York, Stowe, Vermont, and Honolulu, the Newman's Own Foundation, and the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation.
Expect a masterpiece.
I heard a laugh, a strange one.
Charlotte Bronte's unforgettable heroine comes at last to Masterpiece Theater.
Jane! Do you think that I have no heart?
I love you. Jane Eyre.
Sunday evening at 9.